What happens when America's most beloved icon walks into a studio expecting warmth, and instead finds quiet condescension, thinly veiled mockery, and a host who mistakes arrogance for authority? This isn't a story about shouting. It's a story about restraint, about dignity, and about the moment even the kindest person alive decides, enough. What unfolded on The View that morning would end with stunned silence, a broken rhythm, and a walk-off no one saw coming. The studio looked exactly as it always did in wintertime. Soft golden lights, a carefully arranged holiday backdrop, candles glowing behind the glass desk, wreaths framing the windows, and the unmistakable warmth that The View liked to project, especially this time of year. It was designed to feel safe, inviting, friendly. Dolly Parton noticed all of it the moment she stepped onto the set. She wore black sequins that caught the light without shouting for attention, her blonde hair styled just enough to be unmistakably Dolly, but softer than the stage persona people expected. She waved to the audience, that familiar smile instantly pulling applause from every corner of the room. Joy Behar watched her closely, not smiling, not frowning, just watching. Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward first, as she usually did, grounding the moment. "Please welcome the one and only Dolly Parton." The applause swelled again. Dolly nodded, placed a hand briefly over her heart, and sat down, folding her hands neatly on the table. 2. The View mug sat between her and Joy, ceramic barriers in a conversation that hadn't yet begun. "Thank you for having me," Dolly said warmly. "It's good to be here." Her voice was gentle, familiar, disarming. For the first few minutes, everything followed the script. Whoopi asked about Dolly's latest music project. Another host mentioned her literacy work. There was laughter, polite admiration, safe ground. Dolly answered with ease, thoughtful but concise, never self-promotional, never rehearsed. She spoke about creativity, about giving back, about how she never expected any of this when she grew up in the Tennessee mountains. Then Joy leaned in, not aggressively, not loudly, but with that unmistakable shift, the subtle tightening of posture, the slight tilt of the head that signaled she was no longer listening, only preparing to speak. "So, Dolly," Joy said, her tone casual but edged. "You've been doing this a long time." Dolly smiled. "I have, yes." Joy nodded slowly. "Decades, really. Different eras, different audiences. And yet, somehow, you've never really changed your image." A pause. Not long enough to interrupt, but long enough to feel intentional. Dolly blinked once, still smiling. "Well," she said lightly, "I've always believed if you know who you are, you don't need to chase every trend." The audience murmured approvingly. Joy didn't smile back. "But don't you think," she continued, "that there's something performative about that consistency? I mean, big hair, sparkles, the exaggerated femininity. Some people might say it's a little outdated." The temperature in the studio shifted. Whoopi glanced sideways. One of the co-hosts adjusted her papers. Dolly didn't move. She didn't stiffen, didn't raise her voice, didn't even let the smile leave her face. Instead, she tilted her head slightly. "Well, Joy," she said gently, "I've always thought femininity wasn't something to be ashamed of. It's just one way of being strong." Joy's lips pressed together. "Sure," she said. "But don't you worry that younger women see that and think success means looking a certain way? That being taken seriously requires all the glitter?" The words hung there. Not an outright attack, but not a compliment either. Dolly's fingers rested calmly against each other. Her nails, perfectly manicured, tapped once, softly against the glass. "I think young women are smart enough to decide for themselves," she replied. "And I trust them more than I trust labels." A ripple of applause moved through the audience. Joy leaned back, crossed her arms. "I'm just saying," she added, "you've built a brand, and brands can sometimes distract from substance." That was the moment, not when the words landed, but when Dolly realized how they were meant to land. This wasn't curiosity, it wasn't dialogue, it was a slow erosion. Dolly looked directly at Joy for the first time, not with anger, with clarity. "Well," she said softly, "I reckon substance speaks for itself." Her tone was still kind, still controlled, but something had shifted, and Joy noticed it. She smiled faintly as if satisfied she'd finally found traction. "Of course," Joy replied. I just think it's worth examining. Dolly nodded once. Then examine away, she said. I've lived my life in the open. The audience applauded again, this time louder. Joy didn't join in. She only adjusted her mug, eyes fixed on Dolly, as if already planning what to say next. And Dolly, still smiling, still composed, had no idea yet that this was only the beginning. The show tried to move forward like nothing had happened. A producer's voice, unheard but felt, seemed to push the panel into a safer lane. One of the co-hosts brought up Dolly's imagination library, smiling with genuine admiration. Over 100 million books, she said, almost in awe. That's not charity, that's history. Dolly's eyes softened immediately. This was her comfort zone, not applause, impact. Well, honey, Dolly replied, books saved me before fame ever did. A child with a book is a child with a door. The audience clapped warmly. A few people even stood, then sat again as the segment continued. Whoopi nodded, pleased. That's what we love about you. You've always been about lifting people up. Joy's mouth twitched at that. Just slightly, like someone hearing praise they didn't think was fully earned. Dolly didn't see it. Or if she did, she chose not to acknowledge it. For a moment, the studio felt normal again. Holiday candles glowed. The camera moved smoothly between faces. The mugs sat neatly aligned like props in a pleasant, controlled conversation. Then Joy slid her mug a few inches forward, and the sound of ceramic scraping glass was quiet, but sharp. So, Dolly, she said. 2 words, a new tone. Let me ask you something. The co-host beside her blinked, as if bracing. Dolly turned toward Joy with that same polite openness she gave everyone. Strangers, fans, presidents, it didn't matter. Her warmth was habit. Her grace was muscle memory. Yes, ma'am, she said. Joy smiled, and it was the kind of smile that didn't invite you in. It measured you. Do you ever worry that your charity work, your goodness, is part of the brand too? A hush dropped across the table. Not because it was the toughest question in the world, but because it sounded like a trap disguised as intellectual curiosity. Dolly's smile stayed in place for a beat longer than it needed to. Joy, she said gently, I don't do what I do to look good. I do it because I remember what it felt like not to have. Joy nodded as if she'd expected that answer. Sure, but you can't deny, Joy pressed, that philanthropy is convenient, especially for celebrities. It creates a shield. So whenever someone criticizes the image, the fans say, oh, but she gives away books. The audience murmured. You could feel people shifting in their seats like they wanted to protect Dolly from the implication. Dolly's eyes narrowed just a hair, barely visible, like a curtain moving in a draft. Well, Dolly replied, still calm, if my work helps people, then I don't mind if it helps my image too. But it wasn't built for that. Joy leaned in, delighted by the way the studio was suddenly holding its breath. Okay, but let's be honest, she said, voice sharpening. Your whole persona, sweet Dolly, kind Dolly, harmless Dolly, it's a performance, isn't it? Whoopi inhaled like she wanted to jump in, then stopped herself. Sometimes you let someone show themselves. Dolly didn't flinch. Instead, she gave Joy a small, thoughtful nod, the way you nod at someone you're choosing not to embarrass. Honey, Dolly said, everything we do in public is a performance. Yours too. A few laughs bubbled up in the audience, nervous, surprised. It wasn't a jab. It was a fact, delivered with softness that made it hard to fight. Joy's eyes hardened. No, she said, mine is conversation. Yours is an act. You giggle, you flutter your eyelashes, you play the cute country doll, and somehow